All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone that's here. Welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the summit so far. My name is Fiona, and I lead internal communications at Course Hero. I'm very excited to welcome you to the session, The Power of We, Engaging Students Through Collaborative Learning, which will be led by Jeremy Logston, Assistant Professor in the library's Informatics and Technology and Education program, as well as the Director of the Center for Literacy. We hope the session will inspire you to share ideas with one another. Throughout the session, we welcome questions, comments, and feedback in the chat. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Logston.
All right, Fiona, thank you very much. I am so happy to be here today, and I'm so happy that so many of you are taking the time out of your day to be here. Let me share my screen, and I cannot share my screen just yet. Oh, now I can. All right, so as you said, my name is Jeremy Logston, and I am an assistant professor at Western Kentucky University. For those of you who may need to show captions, I'm not sure if auto captioning is turned on, but I would encourage you to do this. Hello from St. Louis. We are only a few hours apart, so that is wonderful. And Fiona has also just shared the slides for this session. If you would like to grab those for future reference. This is a pretty information-dense set of slides. I basically violated the majority of the rules of PowerPoint and slides that I use in my own teaching, but I thought, well, I'll provide a copy after, which I also typically don't do for my students. So the information will be there for you if you would like that at a later date. So let me introduce myself a little bit more. My program, Libraries, Informatics, and Technology and Education, that is in the School of Teacher Education, which is in the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences at WKU. My path to getting here has been kind of a long, interesting road that not everybody necessarily follows in this way. I started off as a corrections instructor, and whenever I was approached about participating in the summit and speaking about collaborative learning, I said yes immediately because I have incorporated collaborative learning in every step of my career, all the way back to when I worked in corrections. Now, I worked in a relatively small county jail. The majority of my job was teaching GED classes to inmates, but we also learned, we have some students who have their high school diploma and they just want some enrichment, or they want to even do something more than just sit in their cell all day waiting for whatever is next. We were lucky enough to receive, this was 2003, I believe, a grant through the Workforce Investment Act. This was replaced by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act in 2014, but it was an opportunity that let us, in our situation, work with those inmates who were 19 or 18 years old, and we provided drafting classes, family literacy if they had children, computer classes, and even in this very small setting, we were able to incorporate collaborative learning there. After my time in corrections, I went to be a high school English teacher. In my teaching job as a high school English teacher, I was responsible for the journalism class. And I had a group of sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and we had to put together the newspaper. And that was 100% collaborative learning. We would have students work on isolation and very small things, and then we would come together and put the entire newspaper assembled that we would then print and distribute to the school. After a short time in high school, I went to family literacy and adult education, and I worked with family courts. And there I was helping to reunify families. We would have collaborative family literacy classes, ranging all the way from we're reuniting a family to something as simple as we are now a blended family and we have some step sibling conflicts. Can we work this out? All of this 15 years ago, I made my way to higher ed as an adjunct instructor. progressed full-time instructor, clinical professor, and now I am an assistant professor. And at every step of the way, I have incorporated collaborative learning. So today, my objective for you is to both learn very broadly what collaborative learning is in a little more depth, as well as share some very concrete ideas for some different areas in education. So let's start by talking about what is collaborative learning. And I'm going to read this quote here. Collaborative learning is an umbrella term for a variety of educational approaches involving joint intellectual efforts by students or students and teachers together. Now, I'm sure some of you saw this, it was 1992, and you thought the same thing that I did. This seems really old. And it is an old source, but it is also very accurate. The thing that I so appreciate about this is that it is not just saying it's only joint intellectual effort by students. It can also involve students and teachers together. The project that really kind of got me involved with Course Hero was a podcast, which I'll explain in depth throughout the entirety of this presentation, including giving a lot more very specifics at the end. But it wasn't just collaborative learning that I had the students do group work, and then that was it. I was just as involved as they were in this process. One of the issues, and that's why I have this meme here, and I have a few others embedded throughout, and I say this as someone, I earned my doctorate 7 years ago. So it was not that long ago that I was a student. I'm sure many of you here as educators, you are also still students. And I found that the majority of us have had some fairly unpleasant experiences with group work. And that's one thing that I really want to make sure we clarify here. Group work and collaborative learning are not synonymous. They are not the same thing. I have been in group projects where I had classmates who didn't really want to participate or didn't come to class. I have had group projects where truthfully it felt at the end like I did all the work. And that is what I want to avoid whenever I do collaborative learning in my classroom. I have a comment, groups are tough, both on the ground and online. I'm sure many of you were teaching during COVID, and I tried to do group projects online. And I actually found that sometimes online went a little more smoothly than having them in person. We'll talk about that later as well. But the reason why ultimately group projects, I think, are still worth exploring, I tend to want to call them collaborative learning, is that it's not like this is a skill that we're going to abandon as soon as we leave school. We have group projects in the real world as well. I'm sure every one of us has worked on a group project with our fellow educators, our colleagues on our campuses and in our departments. But learning is an active, constructive process. It is inherently social. We are obviously very social people. I really like this word here of mentor. So teachers should play the role of a guide, coach, or mentor. A mentor is someone who accelerates our growth. They help us find a clearer path with as few distractions and obstacles as possible. Mentoring can obviously open doors, and this is a really important thing that we can teach our students. One of the most important people in my life was a mentor I found in high school. His name was Steve Kistler. He was my chemistry teacher in high school. Before I tell this story, I will also share that he was a friend of my family. He and my mother had worked together outside of education previously, so he knew my family. But what made him such an amazing mentor with me is he said, as we were graduating high school, when you get to college, if you're in chemistry class and you're ever struggling, call me, let me know, and I will help you out. And I took inorganic chemistry my first semester. And as we were heading into finals, I was a bit overwhelmed. We had basically crammed all of AP chemistry into one semester in college. And I thought, you know what? He said that. I'm going to take him up on that. So I called him thinking he was not a wrestling coach. No, he was He was just he was a chemist. I called him, took him up on that. He came to my house. I thought he was going to walk me through a few project or a few problems over the phone, but he said, I'll be coming through around 5 o'clock. Will you be home? If you are, I'll stop. And he came to my house and we sat at my kitchen table and he helped me prepare for my final exam. And that is something that was far beyond his scope as a high school chemistry teacher when I was no longer in his class. Mentors, I think, are so tremendously valuable, and that is at the heart of collaborative learning. This I found from the University of Nebraska Medical College. This is just I think, a really powerful graphic that I wanted to share that kind of explains the difference between group work and collaborative learning. I'm not going to read every step of this to you, but I do think it is worth pointing out that in group work, it's an independent division of work. And there are times that may be part of the assignment. But whenever I did collaborative learning with my project through Course Hero, I didn't say, all right, Joe, you do this. Sally, you're going to do this part of it. Timmy, you're going to do this part. And Rachel, you're going to do this, and then you'll come back together. I gave them as a group, here's your assignment. You're going to do it together. It requires group effort on every part. There's no splitting it up. I don't like the word freeloaders. That's a little negative, but I also can't lie and say that I haven't been in group where I felt like there were students who were just there to get the grade. In collaborative learning, the members they're mutually dependent on each other. I also really like this last line, the emphasis on product or the emphasis on process and product, which I think is a tremendously important delineation. With group work, the product might be, here's the paper you were supposed to create. With collaborative learning, it was, what did we learn through this together? And yes, Jennifer, I love social loafer. I like that a lot better than freeloader. It just sounds a little less negative, but it definitely counts. And Christina, yes, we will absolutely share the slides. It's been placed in the chat a bit back, but I'll also have a link at the end so you can grab those. Some of the benefits of collaborative learning, which I just want to hit really quickly. Higher level thinking is, I think, so tremendously vital. You can't do collaborative learning really in any real depth at like the remember, understand, or maybe even the apply might be different levels of Bloom's. With evaluate, create, analyze, here's where we can get into those higher level thinkings. And that is something that really comes out of collaborative learning. The promotion of that student-teacher interaction, I think, is tremendously important. I have a really quick story that I want to share just because it really emphasizes the importance of that student-teacher interaction. I taught high school. Even when I did family literacy, I worked with adults, so I have never taught the little ones unless it was my own son. But I have a friend who is an elementary teacher, and after winter holiday break, one of her students came up to her, gave her a big hug and said, "Oh, Miss Smith," that wasn't her last name, "I'm so happy to see you." And, she hugged back like, "Oh, I'm happy to see you too." And he shared, "I haven't had a hug since we left for break." And it just, the parent and the educator in me, it broke my heart thinking the teacher was the only positive adult interaction that this small child had. So when we can foster these positive adult relationships, that's a huge benefit. It's also great to have an increase in both exposure to and understanding of diverse perspectives. We know that in the workforce, we're going to be exposed to diverse perspectives. I am from a fairly rural area, and I often have students who haven't been exposed to a lot of diversity until they come to college. And for some, it's an easy shift and they jump right into it. And some struggle a little bit. And just for the sake of like, well, I want to be comfortable, I'm going to stick with people who think like me. One thing that I think is also tremendously important to be aware of in this, we live in an age, and this is apolitical. This is just an absolute fact. If we consume social media or the news on our electronic devices, the various algorithms that control what we observe, as soon as we watch a video or read an article on topic X, is going to start sending us more about topic X. And it's really easy to find ourselves in an echo chamber of just that perspective. Being in collaborative learning environments can help adjust that. In addition, it allows us to prep for the workforce because, again, we very seldom don't work in isolation. And yet, JL Graff, you make an excellent point. Collaborative learning very quickly can turn to group work without that student-teacher interaction. The student has to be involved. Without this, the teacher has to be involved. Without the teacher involved throughout the process, it could very easily become, let's just divide this work up and get done quicker. And I don't say that negatively as a way of like, well, students are trying to cheat the process or anything else. It's just, hey, let's be smart and divide this work up and be done quicker because they're not necessarily viewing the full picture. And I say that as something that I'm sure I also did in my own undergraduate and graduate coursework. The last thing, collaborative learning fits in really well with the constructivist approach to learning. I do a lot of professional development for teachers. And one thing that I always emphasize is we want to build knowledge. We don't want to do what in my area we call a park and bark, which means you park yourself in a chair, somebody barks at you all day, and then you get to leave and you get a certificate of completion. We want to build that knowledge with everyone involved. So at this point, oh, and Fiona just shared a great link in the chat of 44 different things you can check out about collaborative learning. At this point, I would like to do a Zoom poll. So this Zoom poll is going to ask about your experience with collaborative learning. I would just kind of like to take a sort of a temperature check of the room. So is this something you engage in it regularly? You've used it on occasions. You've never really used it, but you're interested in getting ideas, or you're not really sure what all it encompasses. So there is no wrong answer. I'm just curious, where are you currently? And Juan, I agree. We should absolutely assess the process and not just the product. That is a tremendously important point because we know the learning doesn't occur just when it's done. The learning occurs throughout the entire process. Oh, Laura, you bring up an excellent point. Adjuncting, there are so many layers of things we could discuss about adjuncting. Adjuncts tend to be there's no tend to be. Adjuncts are the lowest paid support in college. And I have seen many classes and departments that could not survive without adjuncting. And it's rough because adjuncts are paid just for their time in the classroom and they don't get that departmental support that full-time instructors and professors get. So that is a tough situation. Yeah, they're definitely the worker bees. I really would like to see our adjuncts treated a lot more fairly. My university actually just said we're going to start paying our adjuncts a little bit more, and it wasn't a lot more. It's still not a living wage, but I was at least happy to see that we're compensating them more. All right, so our poll results. Thank you all so much for participating. It looks like the majority of you have used collaborative learning in your classroom on some occasions. Some of you aren't really sure what that is. Hopefully you'll leave today with a better picture of it. Some of you are already doing it. I'm so excited about that. And I love that some of you have never done it, but you're interested in getting ideas for it. I'm going to share some concrete ideas later in this presentation. So let me talk really quickly about what I did with Course Hero. So last year, I was fortunate enough to receive a Course Hero grant. It was some seed money for a college success podcast. I primarily teach, well, no, I exclusively teach teacher prep students. I primarily teach graduate now, but at the time I was teaching an undergraduate course. And I thought, this would be a great collaborative learning opportunity to get them together and just let them research their own topics. I gave some guidance. I didn't let it go completely, unchecked. I gave the class a group of topics. We divided up into groups and they researched, recorded, and edited their own podcast episodes. And this link, which will be in the slide, studentsuccesspodcast.podbean.com. We've had 5 episodes of our podcast released, and it went so much better than I ever imagined it could have. One thing that I was so impressed with is I had one student who said, I'm so excited about this. I already do a personal podcast. I have all these great ideas. And his team, truthfully, with his expertise on the team, I was tempted, like, let's pull back a little bit. We don't want it to turn into the you show, but at the same time, I'm like, you've got a lot of knowledge and experience that others in your group don't have. So let's explore that. And their podcast was fantastic. They did it in basically one take, and it was entertaining and informative and fantastic. Now, there are some people in the chat talking about some free podcast versions. Podbean is a paid platform, but there are some free ones out there. I would have done the free one. Anchor is also a free way to do it if I had not been lucky enough to have the startup funds to do that. So very quickly, let me just explain what went well and what didn't. So I was surprised to learn, and this is something I discovered as I was writing for this grant proposal. Gen Z is the highest in podcast consumption, and that really surprised me. I guess I would have thought that millennials would have been the highest, especially, in our current world of true crime podcasts, but Gen Zs have the highest. 28% of the overall population listen to a podcast weekly. However, there is, of course, a problem with that, and that is just the market is so oversaturated with podcasts. So even, there's 70 million podcasts out there. 3 million of them are currently active, and that is difficult. There's some comments. I think the greatest challenge is for students to accept their own voice. I'm sure those of you who've worked with students, if you've ever recorded them, there was a lot of like hand holding and saying, it's okay. Your voice sounds great. It's okay. So the cons were, I said, put passion and interest here. I put it on both sides. I had a few students who I could not fully convince to get on board with it. They did it, and you could just tell they weren't as interested. However, the pros, one of the best things is that podcasting has such a low cost entry. If you have a laptop or even a cell phone, you can absolutely do this. I am also, again, director of the Center for Literacy. There is a power of audio over text. I put modified definition of text. I just do want to very quickly sort of clarify that text is not just written. Text can be a lot of things. Text can be audio, video. It can even be things like buildings at times. It's kind of anything you're studying. Laura, thank you so much for sharing that about the different generations. Yeah, Gen Zs, they consume podcasts more than the rest of us. So my plan going forward, I am continuing the podcast. I have another education class that I'm co-teaching this fall. We're going to keep doing the podcast. We're going to incorporate these new students, and I'm going to start bringing in faculty and other stakeholders. Our dean has already said she is on board to be in a podcast. I'm hoping I can get our university president involved. And we're going to start pushing our advertising a lot harder for the coming up. Crystal, excellent question. Do schools require waivers? At the college level, they're all adults, so I just had them sign a permission form because as 18 years old, they can sign that. If I were doing this in high school, I would probably send home a waiver to, like, for the parents to say, yes, they can work on this. And if I had a student whose parents did not allow them to have their voice shared for whatever reason, there are still things they could do to help write the script, edit, so forth, to participate in that. I do want to think, in the interest of time, because we're swiftly running out of time, I left quite a bit of time for this podcast. Sorry, for this Padlet to talk about podcasts. So let me jump over to that. If you would, for a minute or so, go into the Padlet and leave some comments on how could you or have you used podcasts in your classroom. And yes, Carmen, you may absolutely email me to explore more podcast information. I am going to put my email address in chat. It is also on the last page of this slide. This slide deck. I am always very happy to talk about podcasts because it has gone so well with my class. Even, while it may not have done exactly what I wanted to do, it went really well. I've not used podcast in chemistry, but I think it could be done. All right, that's interesting. I see one here. I've used podcast. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. As an assignment where students interview a historical figure. That is such a cool idea, because whoever is going to be the historical figure would also have to do a lot of research. That is fantastic. And you all have access to this Padlet, so you can go back and see what others have done. I have an assignment where students select a BIPOC social work pioneer, create a podcast. These are some really, really fantastic ideas here. Criminal justice, I can only imagine the podcast work that you could do there. Interviewing an author or character. I love this. These are some great ideas. I will go in and I will kind of move these around later to make sure that everyone's can be seen. But this is fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. Set up a podcast area with the equipment so students can concentrate on the content. I think that is a really cool idea as well, if you had the resources to have like a podcast area in your classroom. So I'm going to keep moving on, but please keep adding your thoughts there, because this will exist later. Kristen, I will go ahead and answer that right now. Anchor and Spotify are both free platforms for podcasts that all you have to have is a way to share. Some of these I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I am swiftly running out of time, and I want to make sure you all have time to ask me questions. So if there's anything here that I go through too quickly, please feel free to ask during the Q&A or email me separately, and I'm happy to answer. So some strategies for facilitating collaborative learning. I was so surprised to find out that Think, Pair, Share, which is something that I have done since the early days of my teaching, is collaborative learning at a very quick and small level. If you're not sure what that is, you have students think for a moment, they turn to their neighbor, they share their thoughts together, and then, in the pair, they talk together, and then they share with the entire room. Things like pro-con debate. This is something, whenever I do a pro-con debate, even at the college level, I always make sure I choose topics that are very safe to discuss. Like, I don't want us discussing anything that could be political. So we'll do things like peer pressure or artificial intelligence or space exploration, things like this, things that people might have an opinion about, but it's not tied into anyone's identity. Jigsaw, if you're not familiar with Jigsaw is where you divide your class into groups. Each group becomes an expert on one topic, and then the groups split up, so that you then have everybody sharing what they're an expert on, and it makes all the learners be very actively involved. There's so many online collaboration tools. Flip, which I'm still struggling not calling it Flip Video, is basically a visual discussion platform. Wikis, Google Docs, these are some ways just to have people basically think, pair, share, but in a smaller, in a virtual environment. Socratic seminars, have step into another's shoes. So one thing that I do want to very, very quickly discuss whenever I do groups, and I do this if I'm teaching a PD or I'm teaching 18-year-old freshmen, I do not allow self-select if I'm doing a group where I want some true collaborative learning. And that's because people tend to want to go to their friends, their group they know. Random.org is a website. It's completely free to use. It's obviously not true randomization because that doesn't exist, but you can go to list randomize, put in everyone's name, and then click randomize, and it will divide that group up. And you can say, okay, all right, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you all are together. And it keeps people from self-selecting into a group they already feel very comfortable with, because we want to push them out of their comfort zone just a bit. So whenever I do group work or collaborative learning group work, I like to assess both the individual and the group work separately. And I also I collect non-anonymous feedback. And what I mean by that is I do not allow my students to give feedback on the group without putting their name on it. Again, I teach adults, and if you're 12th grade or lower, you may want to do that differently. I don't have them share it with the entire group. It's I know who said what about the other group members, and I have them assess both themselves and each other. Beth is sharing a great fun grouping of chocolate in the bag. I think that's awesome. I have seen so many ways to do groups beyond just find the people sitting near you or the people you're most comfortable with. So some concrete collaborative ideas podcast. Obviously, I feel very strongly about this. You could also do a YouTube channel, YouTube short, flyers on campus, and one that I'm going to start working on with my next class is a group TikTok where my students would record 3-minute or less videos on certain topics, almost like mini video podcasting. And I see my friend Fallon in there. Fallon, I cannot wait to talk to you about that more. Community projects. This is something that I am so excited about. You have students find something in the community that is connected to the content of your class that they would like to see improved. One that I found that, a very, very good point about TikTok in Florida. One that I saw, and I wish I taught biology, and I'm trying to figure out if I can do it in my education class. It's called guerrilla gardening. And if you're not sure what guerrilla gardening is, students make seed bombs, which is clay, compost, and seeds. It dries out, and then as they're going around on a walk, they can just toss it into an area where maybe there isn't any life and any flowers, and wildflowers can grow there. And if you do indigenous to the area flowers, then you can bring a little bit of beauty. Another one for a history class or an English class, record stories from veterans at their local nursing home. Or one that I've had several of my students do in my graduate classes. These are teachers in the field. They have had their math students create a budget and operate a coffee cart in their school. And I actually have one school that's currently doing it in lower elementary. They take orders from the teachers, they figure out how much it would cost to do it, and they go around and deliver the coffee on Friday morning that the teachers have ordered. And it's just a fun way to make math very practical. Case studies. I do have a word of warning here about when you do a case study. When I do things like that, I will give each person a task. I have found, and I know this because I was this person, I wouldn't say I'm lazy, but I'm not shy. I'll talk in front of anybody. And the presenter is often that student who's like, I don't really understand what we're doing. You all tell me what to say, and I'll stand up and say it. But this can be mitigated by having the teacher circulating the room. Gallery walk. If you're not sure what gallery walk is, here are the broad directions, but you have You put large sheets of paper up, or even just a small sheet of paper that you tape up with an open-ended question on each one. Each group of students that you divided up gets a certain color of marker, and they rotate around the room, write their answers on the sheet of paper, and then they get back to their original question, and they can see what the entire class has responded, and then they can consolidate that information and share it out with everyone. Problem-solving activities, shades of case study. You give them a complex problem, provide them with the resources and tools they need to solve it, and then have them analyze different solutions, different perspectives, and come up with different solutions. Role-playing is, I think, another fun one. For example, in a business class, students could simulate a boardroom meeting or negotiation. Back when I taught high school, this was in the mid-2000s. We had just read Oedipus Rex, and my students did a role-playing where the characters of Oedipus Rex went on a talk show. And my students got so involved and bought into that just because we took what we would be doing and put it in a fun format. And then expert panels, this is similar to a jigsaw where the class divides into groups. Each one gets a topic of expertise related to the course material, and then they share back out. I am going to skip this Padlet because we only have a few minutes left, but I will leave it up. So if any of you would like to go to this and leave your thoughts, and then we can all see later what we have shared about it. What are some avenues of collaborative learning that you think could be useful in your classroom? So I'll leave this up permanently so that you can have access to that. I don't want to talk too much about the podcast unless you have specific questions. A few of you have mentioned, like, practically, how did you do it? What I did was I gave them a list of 15 topics they could choose from. Here are the topics here on the screen. You'll notice that someone said, like, the Mathletes or Scott's Tots. Any Mean Girls fans or The Office fans will recognize those. I had my groups give themselves names, so that is what they chose. They did a research on their topic, they did a script, and then they set a time up with me. We recorded it. I gave them the raw data, they edited, and then we posted it on Podbean, and they're there to this day. Here's some of the resources that I used. I did buy a Yeti microphone. I also bought a software called Camtasia, but you can do all this for free. If you're a Mac user, there's GarageBand. Audacity is free. OBS Studio, for those of you who may want to do a video podcast, is also free. And while cell phones and laptops obviously aren't, there are so many podcasts that just use the equipment that our students already have with them. And here's kind of some of the challenges that I did face. But by staying involved and this being a process and not a product assignment, I was able to mitigate these. And I can also say that everyone did extremely well. I was so impressed overall with everything that happened. So at this point, all right, so I'm going to take a look at the questions in the Q&A. I'm going to try to monitor both the Q&A and the chat here in our last few minutes. Marjorie, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, do I assign groups to ensure diversity of experiences, or do you let students pick teammates? I have done both. I don't necessarily do like any kind of poll or information, but I do like to have a diversity of experience as much as I can. I have in the past done get to know yous, and I'll ask questions that I will then use to divide them up in ways that can help that. Rosalind, Padlet is 100% free. I love Padlet. You can only do 3 at a time, but once you can go in and delete them and do more. So I'll leave these 2 up for the rest of the summer for anybody who would like to go back to them. Marjorie, I'm also seeing an increased number of students living with serious anxiety issues that prevent them from interacting with groups. That is a very fair point. I have as well. This has been a barrier to running even small groups for small activities like think, pair, share, and class at times. Do you have any ideas about handling this? Yes, I have also experienced that. So what I typically do in situations like this is on my very first day of class, I explain to my students, we will have class discussion, we will have group activities. Working at a university, I have had students come to me with something from what we call our SARC office, which is accommodations. If that happens, I've had students who may have, not that I police bathroom usage because I teach adults, but I've gotten accommodation letters that say this person can go to the restroom or step out of the room as often as they would like, or this person is allowed extra time to do test or whatever it is. Now, if it's something I'm doing like a discussion, I will encourage them to come to me after class or send me an email. One thing that has happened to me a lot whenever I do that is I've had students say, I am painfully shy. I'm very much an introvert. I would like to participate, but my anxiety will not let me speak up during class. Now, this is a class for my freshman seminar. If my education students do this, I will sometimes have a little, not tough, but a little more like, if you're really shy talking in front of people, are you sure teaching is the job for you? And I have had students who, both directions, have come out of their shell and they're like, I can talk to kids. It's my peers that I can't talk to, which I think is a very fair question. But I have made accommodations in how they answer the assignment or answer the question. If I'm doing like a Socratic seminar, and I will tell them you have two options and you tell me which you're more comfortable with. If your concern is that you don't know how to jump into a question, into the discussion, then I will call on you when you give me a certain signal or make eye contact with me. I'll make sure to call on you so you can get your points for the discussion. Or if it is a case of, no, I'm too shy, I can't even do that, I will say, then have a sheet of paper and make your comments on a sheet of paper and turn those into me, and we'll do it that way. One person, and I'm not sure who said that. Teresa, a discussion board forum for those who don't feel they can talk in class. I think that is excellent. Ken, I think, made an excellent point that when it comes to podcasting, part of it is helping them find the confidence and the acceptance of their own voice and that their voice matters. And I think that is a tremendously powerful way to address that as well. To encourage them, like, I understand you're shy or you feel that what you have to say doesn't matter, but I assure you that it does. And that this is something that my wife and I have talked about a great deal, is that a lot of our students' anxiety in the classroom comes from former teachers. It's not based on anything else. My wife, who has a degree in biology and a degree in music, she's one of the smartest people I know, but she has had teachers in the past make her feel ashamed of participating. So my wife, who can play the flute in an orchestra in front of thousands of people, will sometimes be very quiet in the classroom because she's had bad teacher experiences. And I find that we teachers can do a lot to mitigate that. All right, I think we are almost out of time. Thank you all so much for being here and these great questions and discussions. I've had so much fun talking with you today.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Logston. Thank you, everyone, for joining this fantastic session. And thank you, Jeremy, for sharing. And once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I hope to hear from you if you have any questions. Bye, everyone.